Welcome to Luxury Icons, the marketing and PR podcast created by the Luxury Communications Council. I'm Rosie Shephard, the founder of the Luxury Communications Council, the world's only membership network dedicated to advancing the global luxury industry by uniting, supporting and championing marketing communication leaders. This podcast is dedicated to meeting some of the industry's most prolific leaders, delving into the challenges and opportunities that we face together. I'm delighted to welcome Chioma Nnadi, Head of Editorial Content of British Vogue. Now, Chioma took the editor role just over a year ago, moving from New York, where she was the fashion news director at Vogue.com. She began her career in London at independent fashion and music titles, The Faber and Trace, before securing a role at the London Evening Standard, later moving to New York to join the Vogue family. Now, Anna Wintour described Chioma as beloved amongst her colleagues and an editor and writer with an impeccable reputation. Very high praise indeed. Firstly, welcome to LCC. It's an absolute privilege to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Of course, and congratulations on a phenomenal start. I'm told your first issue in April was the most commercially successful in British Vogue's history,
Wow.
which is an incredible feat. But before we dive into that, I'd like to go back a little step, if you don't mind, to the very beginning of your journey. Can you recall your first encounter with luxury or fashion that inspired you to want to be part of the world?
I think I came to it quite late. I remember going to, I think I went to Selfridges and I saved some money and I bought a Sonia Rykiel striped jumper. That was maybe my first kind of interaction with fashion in that world. But I think I was much more influenced by the street and by musicians and by club culture. I think getting dressed to go out was the first time I sort of started thinking about luxury brands, because brands like Dolce & Gabbana and Moschino were very popular then for clubbing and going out. And that was really where I got to play with fashion and began to think about fashion. But I was always going vintage shopping and going to flea markets, and every weekend I'd go to Portobello Road. I was very into fashion, but it wasn't perhaps through the luxury space. That wasn't my entry point.
When Anna Wintour gave you the nod for what I imagine was your dream job in your hometown, who was the first person you called to share the news?
My best friend Stella, who I met actually at Vogue. She was working as an assistant to Grace Coddington. She's now a great stylist, and she was one of the first people I met at Vogue and really befriended, and I had to call her immediately. So it was, I think working at Vogue for so many years, there are so many friendships I've made, and it does feel like an extended family in a weird way. So I think it made sense for me to call her, because she understood just where I'd started and why I began at Vogue, and what a big deal it was to get this job.
Well, it's a big deal by anybody's standards, whether you're part of the Vogue family or not. When you were appointed, did you have a clear vision of the direction and how you wanted Vogue to evolve? Or was that something that crystallized after you stepped into the role?
Well, actually, as part of my application, I had to put together a presentation. And I think it was a real opportunity for me to take a step back from where I was in that moment, working in the States, and think about just how much London continued to shape me and my sense of style, and the UK and what it meant to be British in America. And I sort of started to think about the things that I liked most about British style and British fashion and the creative scene here, and the fact that we make things happen from nothing. There's a scrappy spirit and this amazing creativity in this city. And then this idea of kind of what the British eccentric meant to me in that moment, and this idea of all these different influences, the things that shape my sense of style, and the things that shape British sense of style, from the royals to to football to dance culture. So I think that was really a moment for me to step back and think about really how fashion through the lens of culture, what it really meant for in a British context, and thinking about how we could celebrate what it means to be British now in the fashion space.
Great, and we'll talk a little bit more about your first edition in a minute, but I wanted to ask quickly first, the relationship between you and the international team. So Anna is obviously Global Editorial Director, Ed Bedingfield moved over to being, it's quite a mouthful, this title, Global Creative and Cultural Advisor. How does it all work, and then how, I guess, do you balance that global perspective with the local?
Yeah, I mean, things really opened up for us when we started to work more globally, and I remember being introduced to colleagues in Spain, in Italy, in France, and suddenly having these huge meetings on Zoom with different international editors. And for me, it was quite exciting and eye-opening because obviously we can get very competitive with each other, and we had been in that way. So it was quite a cultural shift for us to be suddenly working together, collaborating, and you learn so much from your colleagues, and you understand these different cultural nuances so much more. So I think it's actually been quite kind of enriching to work in that way, and it's something that we continue to do. And some of my sort of great, I suppose, closest colleagues are some of the other head of editorial content. I'm very close to Francesca Ragazzi, who runs the Italian Vogue, and we have a long friendship. She used to work in the American office, and so it's been really great to see her career progress, and also just to see her becoming a mother and taking on this role. So it's been really nice, actually, to get to know everybody internationally, and now that we work globally.
And is much of your content from London going international?
Yeah, I mean, there's a real balance between having a global perspective, because there are global stars that resonate and global features that make sense, that work in the British market. I'm thinking of Jacquemus, who recently opened a store on Bond Street, and that was a global story that we all ran. I think everyone can agree that his brand has become globally relevant, and then there are stories that only work here. When I think about, we did a story on Molly May Hague, and I wasn't in the UK when she first blew up around Love Island, so I had all of my colleagues trying to explain to me like why we should do her and what her story was. And then over the summer, there was that big moment when she obviously had this massive breakup, and everybody was obsessed with her. So, but that story wouldn't have caused a stir anywhere else. I mean, same for Billie Piper. She was in the first issue, and she's such a fantastic actress, and she has such an amazing story. And it just made so much sense for us to do her, and it had so much resonance here in the UK. And those are the stories I get most excited about when we're able to tell them.
Well, you have become known for blending the sort of the real high and low seamlessly. So that might be pairing Balenciaga with M&S, or featuring indeed reality stars alongside A-list stars. Is this juxtaposition something you consciously champion? I mean, it sounds like very much yes.
Yeah, I think, I think some of the advice I got when I took the job, I think of Will Welsh, who's the global editorial director for GQ, and we'd worked together when I was at the Fader, and so I've known him for many, many years. And I just said, well, what's your advice? What advice would you give me? And he just said, know that these brands, they have elasticity. You can stretch them. You can take them to different places, and they'll still hold, because they're just these very elastic legacy brands. And I thought that was something that really stayed with me, that we can take risks, that we can give people the unexpected. And that's quite exciting to me, because I really like surprising people. I like going in unexpected territory. That really I think is one of the most exciting parts of my job.
Yeah, great. Well, we love watching you do it. If you don't mind, I'd love to talk about your own style. The role of British Vogue editor has traditionally come with a certain amount of spotlight. But actually, the Times recently described you as being a bit more low-key than the other editors. They said you actually preferred Adidas trainers to high heels, and you browsed charity shops as well as catwalks. You mentioned it yourself, Portobello Market. But meanwhile, you describe yourself as, first and foremost, a storyteller. Do you consider yourself a sort of new type of editor?
I do think the media landscape has changed. Since, 25 years ago, things looked so different, and what an editor's remit was so different. Now I'm looking. I think my title, head of editorial content, reflects that. I'm not just looking at a print publication. I'm thinking about TikTok. I host a podcast. I'm thinking about Instagram. We have an app now. I just came from the Lightroom, which is an experience. So I think it's so much broader. It's so much bigger. It's busy, and there's lots to do, and there's never a dull moment, and that's very exciting. And I think we haven't been in a more kind of fast-moving media landscape. That we've never seen this before. I don't think people can anticipate where media is going, and we have to be nimble. We have to try new things, and that for me is really invigorating. I think one of the great things about working at Vogue and working under someone like Anna is that we're constantly challenged to look to the future. We're constantly challenged to do things that you've never seen before, and newness is a real focus. So I think that's been the driver. And in the last year, I think it's definitely been front of mind for me.
Yeah, and with all that in mind, so you arrive on your first day as editor of Vogue, or the proper title. What was your first priority?
I think for me, I came from a digital background. I was the editor of Vogue.com in the States, so I was very much thinking about a digital landscape. And for me, I thought back to when I was a teenager and when I first picked up Vogue, and actually as an 18-year-old, maybe I was 17, 18-year-old, I entered the Vogue writing competition. I always knew I loved fashion, and I always knew I wanted to write and be a journalist. And I was trying to remember back to that moment of picking up a magazine and that emotional connection that you get as a young person. And today, I think for many people, their first connection to the brand is on their phone. It's not necessarily picking up a print publication, although that's something that I very much champion and is part of the experience. And I think there are young people who do want to, but there are a lot of young people, that's not how they're experiencing fashion, that's not how they're taking in media, that's not how they're getting their news. So that was the first focus for me. And I remember thinking about, well, how can we, looking forward to Fashion Week, because I started in October, how can we really own London Fashion Week? How can we tell the story of London Fashion Week and really on TikTok, on Instagram, and all of the platforms that we have available to us? So I sort of sat down with the editorial team and said, let's do it 360. Let's think about everything from backstage to street style to the front row, and really bring people into the experience. And we managed to be the kind of the fastest growing fashion account on TikTok that week. We increased our numbers, like by tenfold. So it was a real. I think it was kind of like the first moment where I thought, okay, like the mission, the goal I set out to do, that we're getting traction. And that was really exciting. And I think we think a lot about the big tentpole moments. And I think the great thing about Vogue is that we have the power to sort of start a conversation and think about the Met. I mean, there are billions of eyeballs that we get on the Met, and thinking about, well, what are the temples in the UK? And the first one that came up was really the BAFTAs, and we obviously have a big event that we do, but we hadn't actually had a presence on the red carpet of the BAFTAs itself. And I was like, we need to own the red carpet. We need to be part of the conversation there. And the social strategy really took off. And I'm hoping that it's something that we will develop, and there's lots coming up in the pipeline that I can't quite reveal yet, but it's exciting.
And you did that very fun Vogue BAFTA party, which was brilliant. Thank you so much. Just going back to sort of thinking about that, I guess, different type of conversation you're having with those perhaps younger audiences, but certainly those who consume on the app, and indeed perhaps on TikTok. How do you balance balance the sort of classic tone with that more conversational voice you need for those platforms?
I think having worked many years at digital, I sort of quickly understood, and making that transition, because I did work on the magazine, was that there's a different language in a different space. And you can't just, it's never one size fits all. It's all about thinking about how you communicate, how you loosen up for certain platforms. I think TikTok's a really great example, and have a really amazing team, and actually award-winning team now from this year. So I really trust the people on my team and to experiment and to let people into the experience also in the office, because I think people want to know how we work. It's funny that this week the Devil Wears Prada is opening in the theatre, because I think things are quite different now as far as how much access people get and what people see of what it takes to make a magazine now, because we're constantly telling the story of what we're doing every day in a way that wasn't the case many years ago. So I think the one challenge with doing the magazine is always, how can we make sure that we're meeting the moment? I'm thinking 6 months ahead to who I think will be relevant, and sometimes it's really hard to divine the zeitgeist, and other times I think our instincts are really great, and when we take risks, they pay off. I think about Kylie Jenner. I know that she's quite a polarizing figure, but we had such a great response. I think she looked amazing in Prada, and it just showed that this intersection of pop culture and fashion, it's so compelling, and it's so much part of the conversation now, the cultural conversation.
No, definitely. And just going back to what you were saying about bringing the reader closer in terms of they have a bit more, I guess, optics of how it all works. You launched this immersive experience at Lightroom. So I actually went this weekend with my kids, which actually, sorry to be very down on my children today, but that was a massive mistake. Taking two toddlers basically to an immersive fashion experience isn't a good idea. But it is this beautiful immersive runway. For those who are unfamiliar with it, can you tell us a little bit more, and I guess the objectives behind the creation of it?
Yeah, it's been so fun putting this together. It was a global effort, I'll have to admit. It was lots of editors and staffers, Vogue staffers worked on this. Basically, it's a snapshot in 50 minutes of 100 years of fashion and the history of the runway, starting from Charlesworth, and it shows you the evolution of runway shows from when they were very sort of exclusive, small, salon-style presentations to now when they're communicated and live-streamed across the world. And it was so much fun to put together, because I know many of the editors who'd seen some of those amazing McQueen shows or those Karl Lagerfeld shows. It was quite nostalgic for them. Some of them I'd seen. I remember going to my first Chanel show and just being, my jaw dropping to the floor, having like the beach brought to you, or walking into like a winter wonderland, or having a rocket ship in the middle of the runway. Yeah, you sort of see how things have evolved and how fashion really is reflective of where we are in the culture. So this show is a real introduction, and I was saying to a colleague, if I was 14 walking into this as a fashion fan, maybe not as a toddler, but as a fashion fan, it would have blown my mind, because I've been to some of the shows that are in this show, and even I'm seeing it from a different perspective, because you're completely immersed. You get some of the context also of what it takes to put together a show, because there are backstage notes. I mean, some of the Dior Galliano shows are just incredible to see, and some of you see some of his sketches illustrated in it, and it's quite incredible. And I think it made me fall in love with fashion shows again, because you can get quite jaded, but going to the show will totally crack your head open.
Oh, great. And that's still going for a little while, isn't it?
It's going till April. Tonight, actually, is the launch. All of these months of preparation have been worth it.
Oh, great. Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much for setting it up so we could go. what are the sort of other current and planned initiatives that aim to bring Vogue, or the readers, I suppose, closer to the world of Vogue?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Vogue app, which launched, kind of soft launched over in September, is a really exciting tool for us because community building is something that is super important. And when I started in the world of media, the reader didn't really have a voice, or there wasn't this communication with other fashion fans, and this is a real connector and gives us the opportunity to share, obviously, the world of fashion, but for other people to also share theirs. And it's honestly almost like a sort of a social media hub for fashion lovers. So I think it would be I'm addicted to they have a daily quiz, and it sort of challenges your fashion knowledge, and I still haven't been able to score like 10 out of 10 on it yet, and that's my goal every single day.
If you haven't, then who has?
I know. It's like the equivalent of like a crossword for
Mensa.
fashion nerds. Yeah. So that's really fun, and I think it's going to be able to amplify all the big tentpole events that we do. I know recently it was announced that Vogue World is going to Hollywood, and I think it's quite exciting. I went to the National Theatre a couple of days ago and was talking to Indu, who's the incoming director there, and she was just saying how transformative it was to get that funding, because that was to help to support the arts. And I think now we're seeing that Hollywood is in a state of transition, because a lot of people aren't producing there anymore, and I think this will really invigorate the it's really about shining a spotlight on the people who make things happen, who make the magic happen. So I think it's going to be quite exciting. And the tools that we have now, I think, with the app, make it much easier for us to own those events and to bring people closer to the action.
Mm-hmm. And Vogue World is another great example. It's available for readers to join. 4th year, ticketed to the public. It raises millions for charity. How can brands get involved in it?
Yes, I mean, so many brands were involved with the one in Vogue in Paris. It was such an incredible event and a real team effort, and so many brands made amazing custom pieces. It was wonderful to see it all come together, and especially in Paris, which you always think of as like the home of fashion, and at the Place Vendôme particularly, I think there'd never been an event there, and we all kind of had our fingers and toes crossed because it was meant to rain, and then the sun came out, and it was just quite a magical experience, and it was quite a feat to pull off. But those moments really bring fashion to the wider world. You know, there was that focus on Paris for the Olympics, and this was all sport focused, and it was a really wonderful kind of run up to the Olympics. So I think it's something that we're going to see only go from strength to strength. So yeah, absolutely, brands should get involved with.
Well, there we go. Come on, guys. Let's also talk about the club, because this is also very exciting.
Yeah, Vogue Club has been running for the past few years, and I think it's basically an opportunity for our most loyal fans to get even closer to the action, to get special experiences, and to feel connected to other Vogue fans too, which I think is really important. And there's always special events that are focused on Vogue Club that bring that community together. And recently we had Forces of Fashion, which is where we saw many of our Vogue Club members come to, which is a real celebration of fashion. We had the wonderful Stella McCartney come in and talk to us about what she's working on, and we had John Galliano speak, and several kind of interactive moments too. There was like a walk-off, which was really fun, and it was held at Central St. Martin's, which was really important, and I think it was a big hook for John to come in and be connected to the students, and it was really important for me that it be held there. As a kid, I remember sort of hanging outside of of Central St. Martin's when it was on Charing Cross Road, because I just thought that they were my rock stars. They looked amazing, they dressed amazingly, and it was so inspiring for me. And I think it's one of the best schools in the world. It's brought some of the best designers in the world. It's where they got their start. It's where they got their training. And so it was wonderful to see so many students there, so many young people there. People were clamoring to get those seats on the up front, and people were leaving their shoes on seats. It was and trying to pay other people to get closer to the conversation with John, and it was really special. It was a really special moment.
Amazing. Gosh, that sounds really intimate and wonderful. And there's more to those to come, presumably.
Yeah, they're global. They've become global. I remember hosting one of them in New York with my colleague Chloe Mall, who I do the podcast with. So it's so great to see it being rolled out. That's us doing Emily Ratajkowski in New York. It was a live podcast. I was sweating. I was so nervous because it's so easy doing it pre-recorded and knowing that if you make a mistake, it can be edited out. But
it's now a good time to tell you we're being recorded. Your team okayed
Great timing.
it.
Great timing. I'm totally fine. So far, so good.
You've had lots of practice now.
Yeah, that was quite intense to a live audience. But it was really fun. And so I think they have forces of fashion in India. I know that my colleague in Italy, Francesca, has one, and in Germany they had their first forces of fashion. So it's a really great opportunity for us to open up our world to people who love Vogue and to people who love fashion.
Yeah, love it. And I really enjoyed listening to it. Thank you for your recommendation. The September issue one is particularly interesting. I mentioned before that your first edition was a huge commercial success. So it was coined a love letter to London. It had FKA Twigs on the title, on the cover over there. But since then, we've seen cover stars such as Sophie Turner, Zendaya, Suki Waterhouse, and you've actually brought back some of our favourite contributors, including the much-loved Plum Sykes. What new contributors are you particularly proud of having brought to the table?
Yeah, I mean, I'm particularly proud of having brought IB Kamara into the fold. He's one of my a stylist and creative director who I admire so much. He is the creative director of Off-White, and I have seen him grow from a stylist, a young stylist at Dazed, and now he's obviously the editor-in-chief there, and he's so incredibly talented. There's so much talent in London, and so I knew that when I was launching my first issue, I knew he had to style the cover, and he worked with Johnny Dufour, who was another amazing photographer, British photographer. It was really important that we had an all-British team, and that most of the designers that Twigs was wearing are British designers or British creative directors. She's wearing 16 Arlington there. And on the cover, she's wearing Loewe, obviously headed up by Jonathan Anderson. So it was that was a really important first step for me. And I also am really happy to have Jermaine Gallagher, who's a very talented interior designer, who also has his own magazine, Ton, which is incredible. I encourage everybody to take a read of it. As our contributing interiors editor, he's someone I've admired for many, many years, and he's so fun and brings a really fresh perspective in a world that I'm less familiar with. So it's so good to have his input. And as I said, working with photographers like Johnny Dufour, but there's a long list of people that I'm still interested in working with. But so happy to have someone like IB as an ongoing contributor.
And was it a conscious decision to become more, I guess, editorially led rather than visually led, or did that just happen quite naturally owing to your journalistic background? I
think it was a really natural shift. Mm-hmm. I love to read. I think one of the nicest things about having a magazine in front of you is that you can actually fully immerse yourself in it, and it's not like social media where you're constantly distracted. And I still love getting lost in a book. I still love getting lost in a magazine. I find it really good for my nervous system to just unplug for a second. And it was actually one of the art directors that pointed it out to me. He just was like, oh, I see that you really, you prioritize words. Like, it's part of who you are, and it's part of what the magazine looks like now and feels like now. But it happened very naturally. It wasn't a conscious decision, actually. But I'm glad that you asked me that question, because it did make me think, oh yeah, like, of course.
No, we really felt it and noticed, absolutely. Getting more specific on the editorial side of things, can you just give us a quick rundown of the focuses for the year ahead? So I know this November you had a travel special, for example. What else can we see for the year ahead?
Yeah, well, we always have a really great beauty special, and there'll be an even bigger wellness focus coming up in the summer. Which I hope to have an experiential element to it too, because those in-depth specials are great, but it's nice to bring them to life in another way. Family, and we have a sort of Vogue Kids special, which is really fun to work on too, and travel is such a huge focus for us, and food too. So there are sort of worlds that intersect with fashion now more than ever. So I think. And interiors, obviously, having Jermaine on has made it a real focus for us, so I'm looking forward to kind of spreading tentacles into different areas where there's natural kind of synergy.
Great. Or maybe I can grab a list of any pre-arranged supplements and stuff and distribute it.
Yeah,
I know that's
sure.
what lots of the people in this room
and
indeed
jewelry
listeners.
and watches are huge for us.
Yeah, exactly. Just carrying on the thread of working with you guys, what advice would you give to people in this room, and indeed people listening on the podcast, of how to effectively engage with you and your team?
Yeah, I think it's really thinking about the moments that matter, that have a story that will get us excited, and connecting with the team. I'm so lucky to have a really fantastic team working underneath me, and we meet regularly. But it's really nice to know and to be kept up to date to the stories that matter with as much notice as possible. So even if you're in the infancy of talking in conversations around a new project, just giving us a hint of what's coming really helps shape our planning. We're talking about things for 2026, and I think sometimes it kind of blows my mind how far in advance we're working, but the more notice that we get on things, I think the better.
There we go. Good advice, everybody. Thinking about working with luxury brands, and I guess thinking about luxury brands more in general, on the consumer I guess as consumer values have continued to evolve, do you think that the meaning of luxury and what luxury stands for has shifted?
I do think so. I think now we're thinking much more about luxury being not such an exclusive concept, and much more inclusive. And I do think that for many people, luxury is the idea of luxury has changed. I think we know that wellness and looking after ourselves, and the luxury of getting a good night's sleep, of being able to indulge in not indulge, but to sort of partake in some of the sort of latest wellness or longevity has become such a huge thing. Thinking about how we can make our lives enrich our lives not only with the things that we purchase, but from the inside out. Yeah. So that's a huge focus for us. I was recently talking to a colleague who's very into a new longevity trend called NAD+. I don't know if you guys have heard of it.
Tell us. These
injections that are meant to extend your life.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think there was such a you don't think of luxury as being an evolving concept, but I do think it has very much evolved. What we think of as luxury, and also who we include in the conversation around luxury too.
No, exactly. I mean, amongst the majority of my friends, they're talking about biohacking.
Yeah.
As a lot of the conversations.
Yeah.
It used to be Pilates, now it's this.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
No, it's definitely a thing. You also don't love the word luxury, I believe, which is bad news for the LCC. We might need to rebrand.
I mean, I think we recently had we used to have a luxury editor, but I changed it because I didn't think luxury editor was. We changed it to I think now it's watches and jewelry, because I just wasn't so comfortable with the word. I think now it's still in certain spaces has that connotation of being exclusive, and for me it's really important that that we make Vogue a very inclusive place that people can feel a part of. So I don't necessarily hate the word luxury. I just think it's evolved and it didn't make sense as a title anymore. It felt a little bit. It didn't quite fit the brief for me anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. In your opinion, I'm going to use the word luxury, which luxury brands are excelling at storytelling today? Are there sort of certain ones that stand out to you that perhaps some of the emerging brands should look to and learn from?
And there's so many brands doing amazing work. I think Jonathan Anderson has done an amazing job at Loewe and Demna at Balenciaga too, in challenging and really pushing. And I'm kind of in awe of their work. And then having gone to see Jacquemus in his store, and just how incredibly adept he is at connecting with younger audience and storytelling on social media and making his spaces and experiences as like a huge undone bed in the window shop, which is super inviting, I think. And people want to feel that they're getting an experience when they walk into a store now. It really has to feel like an event, because to get me off my phone and shopping in real life, it has to feel special. And I do think there are certain brands, when you walk into their stores, you feel that, you know, and it's an important part of storytelling and that immersion, that full immersion that you get, that I'm lucky enough to get when I go to a show. I remember, I think I was talking to the folks at Miu Miu this week, and they do such an incredible job when you go into the show and going into the stores too. You feel this real sense of immediacy and urgency and a sort of cultural urgency and currency. And having someone like William Dafoe just appear in their show, that idea of surprise and that moment that people that it resonates beyond the people in the room, because it's become a viral moment. That's so important.
Yeah, that sounds great. We'll have to look that one up. I haven't seen that one. Thinking ahead, looking to the future, you're on the home straight. Last couple of questions. 2025. You've mentioned some exciting projects already. What else can we see from British Vogue?
Yeah, there are a couple of big. There's a kind of a surprise coming around our fashion and film event that I'm very excited around for the BAFTAs. That we'll be able to talk more about very soon. So lots in the pipeline, and a project, a sort of a longer term project I'm working on, wellness project for the summer, that I think is going to be very exciting, that we're finalising. So can't talk too much about it just yet, but definitely lots coming up in the wellness space, and lots coming up around fashion and film that I think is going to be really exciting.
Great. And casting ahead, 5, 10, 15, however many years, what legacy do you hope to leave at Vogue?
It's such a... that's such a big question, a good question, but a big question. I think for me, it's really about making fashion inviting and welcoming, and a welcoming space. I want it to feel like a warm place that people can experiment with, and there's a certain joy and optimism, and that's very much my leadership style. It's about making sure that people feel that they're heard and seen, and I want the magazine and the brand to feel like that, like a place where people can be fun and exciting, but also kind of a space for community.
That sounds great. I'm going to ask the audience if they would like to ask any questions in just a moment, but we have our quick fire question, which doesn't have to be quick at all, because we've actually got a little bit of time.
Okay.
So no pressure. Actually, I've got two quick fire questions, which I'm going to ask you. I had to cut out the other one earlier, but firstly, what is the proudest moment of your career?
It's difficult. I think one of the sort of pinch me moments of my career, aside from obviously doing this job, which is amazing, I think one of the first pinch me moments was my first cover story, which was with Rihanna and for Vogue, and that was an incredible experience and a real pinch me moment.
Oh, I'd love to get the gossip later on that one. And secondly, what is your ultimate luxury?
My ultimate luxury is being in nature. That is my ultimate luxury, with my feet in the earth and just no phones, no just family and nature.
Sounds delightful. Let's all go and do that this weekend. Right, who has a question for Chioma? Everyone's going to be very shy, but someone will get us going and looking at certain people. We covered a lot, didn't we? Okay, anyone? It's always hardest to get the first question. Giving you more thinking time, guys. There we go, Anna. Hi.
Hi, Anna from Chanel.
Oh, do you mind just doing it into the microphone? Thank you, Anna.
From Chanel, I work in the sustainability team, and I just wondered where, sort of in all of this wonderful world that you're creating, where sustainability fits into your community's outlook and where you see that going.
Yes, no, definitely. It's a huge focus for us, and I'm lucky to have an incredible sustainability editor, my colleague Emily Chan, and we're also thinking ahead to. There'll be a moment in April where we focus very much on sustainability. I think, for me, it's really about championing the voices who are doing the work, and that's something that we always try to do. And there are so many designers in the UK who sort of leading the way as far as sustainability, and that's really encouraging, because I think, having had conversations with Stella, who was obviously a big pioneer, it was really important for me to have her be part of forces of fashion, because I think she was kind of a lone voice at the time when she was talking about sustainability, and now I think it's part of the way we work. It's part of the way brands think. But there's a lot more that we could do. I think about textile waste and what needs to be done from a government level, really, on a policy level. And the more that I think we can shine a spotlight on the people doing the work, the more that we can encourage those bigger changes, because I don't think we'll see really sustainable change and really lasting change until it's at a white paper level, at a policy level.
Well, Vogue certainly has the power to lead that conversation. Next question. Yeah, Jenny. Yes, please. Just for the recording. Thank you.
Hi, Chioma, I'm Jenny from List. I'm curious, given London has created so much talent and is sort of known for its creativity, who are the emerging designers that you're most excited about now?
Oh, there's such a long list. I love the designer Jawara Elaine. I think he's also nominated for the Fashion Awards this Monday. Martine Rose is not emerging at all, but someone who I think has been an incredible light for independent design here, still doing her business independently and thriving. Aranesh is a new designer who's really kind of, I think, captured the zeitgeist of young London. And then there's Standing Ground, which is an incredible label doing kind of demi-couture. And I think that's an area that the red carpet, it could use, obviously, some new energy, and he's doing some incredible work there. So I think those would be a few names that I would pick out, but there's so many. London, we're so lucky to be in a capital that has so many young, amazing, independent names.
Absolutely. Any more questions? Yeah, just at the front here.
Hi, it's Annie
Hi.
from Hugo Boss.
Hi.
Hi. You mentioned about the kind of stories that you're looking for the print publication to give you as much notice as possible. Could you tell us a bit about maybe the difference, the kind of stories you're looking for the online offering versus what you're looking for the print publication?
Sure. Yeah, I think with online we can always be very reactive. I think it's always about being part of the cultural conversation, and so much of what we do comes from that, and being super reactive and super nimble. But then we also want to be part of a conversation, be able to start a conversation online. And then in I think versus print, there's much more of a that kind of quick, fast-paced. We can slow down, and we can invest a bit of time. We can do a bit more reporting. We can tell a more in-depth story. And sometimes I want to make sure that we're on the pulse of the news with our digital reporting. And in book we get to tell more personal stories, and we get to kind of slow cook a bit more. But really, with the digital space, it's really about we want to create a newsroom. We want to make sure that we're on the pulse of what's happening.
All right. I think we've got time for one more. Any last one? I know a lot of people on my team would like to ask. We have Shephard Communications. We do lots of hospitality. Are you intending to do any more travel content in the near future?
Yeah, I think it's we do a travel supplement, and it was fun to work on that and to pull that together. And I think as far as luxury, I think experiences are such a huge part of that, and travel is kind of, in my opinion, one of the ultimate luxuries, like being able to sort of see different things and experience different things. So I think travel's going to be a huge focus for us.
Good to know. Well, lots of people in this room will be delighted to hear that. Great. Well, I think that is it. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to hang on to you for 2 more minutes just to do some photography. But that is it for the Luxury Communications Council Leaders Forum 2024. A very big thank you to Chioma and all of our speakers today. What a lineup. And also our amazing partners. Thank you for your support. If you would like to be connected to any of our partners, let us know. We can facilitate these introductions. And don't forget, on your to-do list is listen to our podcast, and also introduce us to your New York and Dubai counterparts if we're not in touch with them already. Thank you all so much for joining, even more importantly, and we really look forward to seeing you in 2025. Our first event is in January on the 30th. Yes, Thursday the 30th. Have a wonderful Christmas break. All right. Thank you so much for joining us for Luxury Icons. This has been brought to you by the Luxury Communications Council in conjunction with Trapdoor Productions. If you'd like more information on the Luxury Communications Council, please visit our website, luxurycommunicationscouncil.com.